In the depths of an Irish night, when fog rolls thick across the moors and the wind carries voices that shouldn't be there, you might hear her. A wail that chills the blood, a cry that speaks of sorrow older than memory. They call her the Banshee, the woman of the fairy mound, and if you hear her keening outside your window, death is already at your door. Welcome to Folklore After Dark. I'm Francis, and tonight we're stepping into the mists of Ireland to meet one of the most feared omens in Celtic folklore. This isn't just a ghost story. The Banshee is woven into the very fabric of Irish culture, a harbinger of death whose cry has been reported for over 1,000 years, and some claim to hear her still. The Banshee, in Irish, Banshee, meaning woman of the fairy mound or woman of the otherworld. She is a female spirit whose mournful wail warns of an impending death in certain Irish families. But she's not a simple screaming ghost. Her legend is far more complex and far more unsettling. Picture this, it's deep in the night, the countryside is silent except for the wind. Then cutting through the darkness you hear it, a sound unlike anything else, not quite a scream, not quite a song. The Irish call it keening, a traditional lament for the dead, but this keening comes from no living throat. Some describe it as a woman sobbing, others say it's a shriek that makes your bones ache. Still others claim it sounds like the wind itself has learned to grieve. But what does she look like? Here's where the Banshee becomes truly fascinating, because there isn't just one appearance. The Banshee takes many forms, and which form she takes often depends on which family she's attached to. Sometimes she appears as a beautiful young woman with long, flowing hair, dressed in a green dress or a gray cloak. Her beauty is otherworldly, almost hypnotic, but her eyes hold an ancient sadness that no mortal should ever witness. Other times she's an old hag, a withered crone with long white hair that she combs endlessly with a silver comb. Her eyes are red from centuries of weeping, and her face is pale as death itself. And in the most terrifying accounts, she appears as something in between. A woman in the prime of life, but with the weight of ages in her expression, blood-red eyes from eternal crying, and a presence that makes the very air feel heavy with doom. But here's what makes the Banshee different from other death omens. She doesn't cause death, she mourns it. She's not a reaper coming to take your soul. She's a messenger, a herald. When a Banshee keens, someone with ancient Irish blood is about to die, and she weeps for them as family. To understand the Banshee, we need to go back, way back. The roots of the Banshee legend stretch into Ireland's pre-Christian past, tangled up with Celtic beliefs about the Aes She, the fairy folk, the people of the mounds. In ancient Irish tradition, the boundary between our world and the otherworld was thin, and certain beings could cross between them. The Banshee is one of these beings. But she's not attached to just anyone. This is crucial. The Banshee traditionally follows only old Irish families. Families with names beginning with O or Mac. Families whose bloodlines run deep into Ireland's ancient past. The O'Neills, the O'Briens, the O'Gradys, the Kavanaghs. These are the families who might hear her wail. Why these families? One theory suggests that Banshees were once women of these very families. Ancestors who loved their kin so deeply that even death couldn't sever the bond. In death, they became guardians, watchers, mourners for their descendants. When someone in the family was about to die, the ancestral spirit would keen just as she would have in life. Another explanation goes darker. Some traditions say that Banshees are women who died in childbirth or died violently and were cursed to forever announce death to others. Their own deaths were so tragic that they became eternally bound to the sorrowful duty of heralding mortality. In Irish tradition, keening, the vocal lament for the dead, was a sacred ritual, often performed by women hired specifically for this purpose. They were called keeners, and their wailing at funerals was believed to help guide the soul to the afterlife. The Banshee in this context is the supernatural version, the eternal keener, performing her sacred duty from beyond the grave. But the Banshee serves another purpose in Irish folklore. She's a reminder of mortality, yes, but also of connection. In a culture that deeply values family, ancestry, and lineage, the Banshee represents an unbreakable bond between the living and the dead. Your family doesn't abandon you even in death. They watch, they warn, they mourn. It's beautiful in a haunting way and absolutely terrifying. Now let's talk about the accounts, because people have been reporting Banshee encounters for centuries, and some of these stories will make your skin crawl. In the early 1900s, a woman named Anne in County Cork woke in the middle of the night to what she described as the most pitiful crying I've ever heard. She looked out her window and saw a figure in white combing long dark hair by the gate. The figure's shoulders shook with sobs. Anne's husband told her to go back to bed, probably just a local woman passing through. But Anne knew better. Her family name was O'Sullivan. 3 days later, her grandmother, who had been in perfect health, died suddenly in her sleep. In County Mayo, a family reported hearing scratching at their window late at night, not like an animal, but like fingernails dragging slowly across glass. When the father went to investigate, he saw a pale woman with impossibly long hair pressed against the window, her mouth open in a silent scream. He could see her breath fogging the glass. The next morning, his brother, who lived in Dublin, was killed in a car accident. One of the most famous accounts comes from the 1950s. A nurse working the night shift at a hospital in Limerick reported seeing a woman in a gray cloak standing outside the ward, keening softly. When the nurse approached, the woman vanished. That night, 3 patients with Irish surnames died unexpectedly, all unrelated to each other, all from old Irish families. But here's what's particularly interesting about modern encounters. They've evolved with technology. In recent decades, people have reported hearing the Banshee's wail over phone lines. A call comes in, there's no one on the other end, just that terrible crying. Others claim to hear it through baby monitors, even when the baby is silent. One account from 2003 describes a family in Dublin who heard keening coming from their car radio, even though it was turned off. The Banshee, it seems, adapts. The Banshee isn't alone in Celtic folklore. She has cousins, variations, spirits that serve similar purposes across the British Isles. In Scotland, there's the Bean Nia, the washerwoman. Instead of keening, she's seen at night washing blood-stained clothes in streams and rivers. The clothes belong to those about to die. If you're brave enough to approach her and polite enough to help her wash, she might answer 3 questions, but most who see her flee in terror. Wales has the Cahiraith, a spirit whose groaning cry is heard before multiple deaths, particularly before disasters or battles. Unlike the Banshee's mournful keen, the Cahiraith's sound is described as more guttural, more agonized. And in Brittany, France, which shares Celtic roots with Ireland, there's the Ankou, a personification of death itself who drives a cart to collect the souls of the dead. Not quite the same as the Banshee, but serving a similar function, a supernatural herald of mortality. What's fascinating is that similar legends exist across Europe and beyond. The Norse had their Valkyries who would appear before warriors died. Slavic folklore has the Polavik and various death omens. It seems humanity across cultures has always believed that death announces itself, that the boundary between life and death is permeable and warnings leak through. So does anyone still believe in the Banshee today? The answer might surprise you. In rural Ireland, particularly among older generations, the Banshee is still very much a presence. Not in a superstitious way necessarily, but as a cultural touchstone. Something that connects them to their ancestors, to their heritage. Even skeptics will sometimes pause if they hear an unexplained cry in the night. And the reports haven't stopped. Online forums and paranormal websites are filled with modern Banshee encounters. A woman in Boston with Irish heritage hears keening the night before her father's heart attack. A family in Australia, O'Connors who emigrated generations ago, report seeing a woman in white outside their home hours before their eldest son dies in a workplace accident. The Banshee has even entered modern pop culture. She appears in movies, TV shows, video games, usually as a screaming monster. But that interpretation misses the point entirely. The Banshee isn't evil, she's not trying to frighten you. She's mourning, she's warning. In her own way, she's showing love, a love so powerful it transcends death itself. Think about that for a moment. Imagine loving your family so deeply that not even the grave can stop you from watching over them, from warning them, from weeping when they pass. That's what the Banshee represents, an eternal bond, an undying devotion. It's both beautiful and tragic, comforting and terrifying. So the next time you're in Ireland, or if you come from one of those old Irish families, and you hear a cry in the night that doesn't quite sound human, maybe don't dismiss it so quickly. Maybe the old stories are true. Maybe someone somewhere is mourning for you. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows. This has been Folklore After Dark. If you enjoyed this exploration of the Banshee, subscribe and join me next time as we venture into another dark corner of world folklore. Until then, sleep well.